The city hummed under flickering neon, rain misting the sidewalks. Michael Harris, a 38-year-old single father, walked home with his loyal dog, Buddy, at his side. Then a scream shattered the night. Michael froze, turning to see a teenage girl dragged toward the shadows by a stranger. In that instant, his choice would change both their lives forever. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Michael Harris, 38, trudged home from a long shift at the hardware store. His work boots were soaked from a drizzle that had lingered all evening, and his only company was Buddy, the loyal mutt who padded faithfully at his side. The city buzzed around them, neon lights, late buses, laughter spilling from bars, but Michael's mind was fixed on his daughter Emma and the leftover pasta waiting in their small apartment. Then it happened. A scream. Sharp, desperate. Michael froze, every nerve on fire. Buddy's ears shot up, a growl building in his throat. Across the street, beneath the flicker of a failing street lamp, a teenage girl struggled against a man easily twice her size. She kicked and clawed, but he dragged her toward the dark mouth of an alley. Michael didn't think. He moved. "Hey!" he shouted, voice echoing off the brick walls. Buddy lunged, teeth bared. Startled, the man shoved the girl away. She stumbled, tripping straight into Michael's arms, trembling so hard he could feel it through his jacket. "What's your name?" he asked, scanning the alley for movement. "Sophie," she whispered. The attacker hissed a curse and scrambled over a fence into the shadows. Michael wrapped his jacket around Sophie's shoulders and steered her toward the diner glowing on the corner. Inside, the scent of coffee and fries wrapped them in warmth. Sophie stared at the table, whispering, "Nobody wants me." "Not really." Sheriff Tom Reynolds arrived, his uniform heavy with authority. "She needs to come with me. Child Services will handle it." "Not tonight," Michael said firmly. "She stays with me and my daughter. I'll sign whatever papers you need." Tom studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "She's your responsibility now." Michael texted Emma, "Guest tonight. Be kind." Buddy thumped his tail. Family, it seemed, had just grown by one. Michael's apartment was modest, 2 bedrooms, a living room that doubled as a study, and walls that hummed with the rhythm of trains passing a few blocks away. Emma, his 11-year-old, opened the door in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed penguin. Her eyes widened when she saw Sophie, but softened almost instantly. "Hi," Emma said gently. "You can have the good blanket." Sophie hesitated, but when Buddy nudged her leg, she followed them inside. Michael reheated pasta while Emma set the table with mismatched plates. The glow of a single lamp lit the room in a soft halo. For a moment, Sophie just sat there, her hands shaking, until Emma slid her penguin across the table. "He helps me sleep," Emma whispered. "You can borrow him." Dinner passed in quiet bites. Michael spoke lightly, about school projects and Buddy's bad habit of stealing socks, letting Sophie listen without pressure. Finally, she whispered, "My mom left me, after the divorce. Dad didn't want me around. I was just, too much." Emma frowned. "Nobody's too much." Michael's chest tightened at his daughter's words. He glanced at Sophie, whose eyes filled but didn't spill. Later, he set up the couch with fresh sheets while Emma insisted Sophie take her room instead. The girl lay down, holding the penguin tight. Michael lingered at the door, whispering a prayer he hadn't said in years. Then Buddy curled up like a guardian at Sophie's side. For the first time in a long time, she fell asleep without fear. Michael knew tomorrow would bring questions, maybe even trouble. But tonight, under this roof, she wasn't unwanted. She belonged. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the living room. Michael brewed coffee, the smell filling the apartment. Emma chattered about school while Sophie sat quietly at the table, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like a cornered bird. Buddy stayed close, pressing against her feet as if he knew she needed an anchor. A knock came at the door. Sheriff Tom Reynolds stood there, hat in hand. His presence filled the small hallway like an unwelcome draft. "Morning, Mike. We need to talk." Michael stepped outside with him. Tom's voice was low but firm. "That girl, Sophie Bennett. Her mother's been missing from the picture for years. Dad's, well, not fit. Child Services should take it from here. You've done your part." Michael crossed his arms. "She's not ready to be shoved into another system tonight. You saw her face. She needs time." Tom studied him. "I know you've got a good heart. But don't drag your girl into something that isn't hers." Inside, Emma was showing Sophie her school drawings. Laughter, faint but real, slipped through the door. Michael's decision hardened. "I'm not dragging Emma into anything. Sophie's already here. And until someone proves to me she'll be safe out there, I'm not letting her go." The sheriff sighed, tipping his hat back. "You're taking on more than you realize." "Story of my life," Michael muttered. Back inside, Sophie glanced up with wary eyes. "Are they sending me away?" she asked. Michael shook his head, sliding her a plate of pancakes. "Not if I can help it." And for the first time, Sophie dared to take a full bite without fear of it being her last meal at this table. By the next afternoon, whispers had already spread. Neighbors at the hardware store patted Michael's shoulder, calling him a hero, though he hated the word. All he wanted was to make sure Sophie didn't feel disposable again. But trouble arrived faster than he expected. Late that evening, another knock echoed at the door. Michael opened it to find a woman in her early 40s, tired eyes, expensive coat, hands twisting together. "Are you Michael Harris?" she asked softly. "Yes. My name is Rachel Bennett." She swallowed. "I'm Sophie's mother." Michael stiffened. He glanced back. Emma and Sophie were coloring at the kitchen table. Sophie froze, eyes widening, the crayon falling from her fingers. Rachel stepped forward, voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve it, but I need to see her. Please. I made mistakes after the divorce. I couldn't handle the drinking, the fighting. I thought she'd be better off with her father. I was wrong. God, I was so wrong." Sophie shot up, fury flashing through her tears. "You left me. You didn't even look back." She bolted down the hallway, slamming Emma's door. Rachel's shoulders collapsed. Michael stood in silence, torn. He didn't know this woman, but he knew the raw guilt in her voice. "Give her time," Michael said finally. "She's safe here. But if you're serious, you'll have to prove it." Rachel nodded, tears streaking down her face. "I'll do whatever it takes." As the door shut, Michael leaned against it, exhausted. Buddy pressed his head against his knee, as if to remind him, this wasn't his fight to win, but it was his duty to stand between Sophie and more heartbreak. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Sophie barely spoke, drifting through the apartment like a shadow. Emma tried to draw her out, offering friendship with board games and whispered secrets, but Sophie's walls held firm. Rachel, however, didn't vanish. Each afternoon she waited outside the hardware store, sometimes with coffee for Michael, sometimes with nothing but her apologies. "Please," she begged him one evening, "just let me talk to her. She can scream at me, hate me, anything, but she has to know I didn't stop loving her." Michael wrestled with it. He remembered Emma's eyes after her mother's death. Grief had nearly swallowed her. Could anger swallow Sophie the same way? He decided the risk was worth it. That night, Rachel came to the apartment. Sophie stood in the living room, arms crossed, trembling with rage. "You abandoned me. Sophie shouted. I was 16, Mom. I begged you to stay. You chose him and his bottle instead. Rachel flinched as if struck. You're right. I failed you. I thought I was protecting myself, but I left my daughter to drown. There isn't a day I don't regret it. The room vibrated with Sophie's fury. Michael stayed back, Emma clutching his hand. Then Sophie's voice broke. Do you even know what it's like to wonder if you matter to anyone? Rachel stepped forward, tears streaming. I know. Because I've wondered the same, every day without you. For a moment, the wall cracked. Sophie's face crumpled, and she collapsed into her mother's arms with a sob that shook the room. Michael closed his eyes, whispering to himself, this is what healing sounds like, pain breaking open into hope. The following week felt different. Sophie still carried shadows in her eyes, but something had softened since the stormy reunion. She came to breakfast willingly now, sitting beside Emma, who always saved her the last pancake. Michael noticed the smallest things, how Sophie leaned down to scratch Buddy behind the ears without thinking, how she laughed, an unsteady sound, when Emma teased her about hogging the bathroom, how she lingered at the table even after the food was gone. She was no longer just surviving, she was learning what it meant to belong. Rachel visited in measured steps. Sometimes she brought groceries, other times she simply stayed on the porch, letting Sophie choose whether to come out. Slowly, Sophie stopped flinching at her presence. One night, Michael found them sitting together on the stoop, Sophie asking shy questions, Rachel answering with a patience she hadn't shown before. Word of Michael's actions had spread through the neighborhood. At the diner, old men clapped him on the back. Mothers whispered thank you as he passed. He shrugged it off, uneasy with the praise. I'm no hero, he muttered to Tom Reynolds when the sheriff dropped by for coffee. Tom chuckled. That's exactly why people call you one. At home, Emma tugged Sophie into her world with unshakable loyalty. They stayed up late whispering in bunk beds, Buddy curled at their feet. Michael watched them with quiet pride, but also a pang of worry. He knew fragile things could be broken. Sophie had begun to trust again, but trust was the hardest thing to keep. The town meeting was crowded that night, the air thick with chatter and the smell of old wood polish. Michael had planned only to slip in, listen to the budget arguments, and slip out again. But when his name was called, the room erupted in applause. He froze, heart pounding. Emma beamed at him from the front row, Sophie sitting shyly beside her. Even Rachel clapped, tears brimming in her eyes. Sheriff Tom Reynolds gestured toward the podium. Get up there, Mike. People want to hear from you. Michael cleared his throat as he stepped forward. The microphone squeaked, making him wince. He looked at the faces, neighbors, co-workers, strangers, and shook his head. I think there's been a mistake. I'm not a hero. I'm just a dad walking home with his dog who couldn't walk past when someone needed help. The room hushed. Michael's voice steadied. Kindness isn't weakness. It's the one thing that makes us human. I didn't save Sophie because I wanted recognition. I did it because any child, any person, deserves to feel safe, to feel wanted. If we all remembered that, maybe the world would look a little different. Silence followed, then the hall filled with applause louder than before. Emma's eyes glowed with pride, Sophie's with something like awe. Michael stepped down quickly, cheeks burning. He hated attention, but as he sat beside the girls, Sophie whispered, "Nobody's ever said something like that for me before." Michael smiled faintly. Then maybe tonight was worth it. Time did what it always does, it moved. The seasons turned over, Emma grew taller, Sophie steadier. What began as a fragile arrangement became something unshakable. Sophie never left Michael's home. At first it was, just until she was ready, but readiness turned into birthdays celebrated together, school plays where Michael sat in the front row cheering for both girls, and nights when Sophie and Emma fell asleep giggling in bunk beds that eventually became their shared room. Rachel worked to rebuild what she had broken. Some days Sophie let her in, other days she kept her at arm's length. But Michael noticed the anger fading, replaced with a cautious kind of forgiveness. Rachel, to her credit, never demanded more than Sophie could give. Michael, meanwhile, carried his own private burdens. The hardware store hours were long, bills often tight, and grief for Emma's mother lingered in quiet moments. But whenever doubt threatened to choke him, he'd see Sophie helping Emma with homework, or Buddy curled at their feet, and the weight felt lighter. One evening, years later, Sophie sat across the kitchen table from Michael, now 19. "You know," she said softly, "that night you stopped didn't just save me. It gave me a family." Michael blinked, throat tight. Emma, 15 now, leaned in with a grin. "Told you, Dad, you're a hero, whether you like it or not." Michael laughed, shaking his head. "No. I'm just a stubborn man who couldn't ignore a scream." But deep inside, he knew Sophie was right. That night on Halstead had stitched together lives that might have unraveled forever. The years had weathered Michael in small ways, more gray at his temples, deeper lines at his eyes, but his spirit seemed lighter now. On a spring evening, he sat on the porch with Buddy at his feet, watching Emma and Sophie laugh together as they planted flowers along the stoop. Sophie, now grown, looked back at him with a smile that carried gratitude and something stronger, belonging. She wiped dirt on her jeans and called out, "Hey, Dad, we're making this place beautiful, whether you like it or not." The word Dad caught in his chest. It had slipped out before, but tonight it stayed, ringing like a vow. Emma beamed at her sister, proud that Sophie had finally said it without hesitation. Later that week, at another town gathering, Sophie stood before the same community that once honored Michael. She spoke clearly, her voice steady. "Years ago, I was lost, convinced no one wanted me. Then one man stopped when he could have kept walking. He gave me safety, and his home gave me a family. That act didn't just change my life, it saved it." She looked at Michael, whose eyes shone though he tried to blink it away. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's choice. And sometimes it's the courage of someone who refuses to look away. Applause filled the hall. Michael bowed his head, overwhelmed, Emma clutching his arm with pride. When the noise faded, Sophie whispered to him, "You didn't just save one life that night. You saved all of us." Michael drew both girls close. "Then it was the best decision I ever made." Under the hum of city lights, with Buddy leaning against his leg, Michael knew, what began as a single act of courage had become the foundation of a family. Not by chance, but by love, and by choice. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.